define the term operating flexibility in regards to aircraft engines. Operating flexibility is the ability of an engine to run smoothly and give desired performance at all speeds from idling to full power output. How are conventional reciprocating engines classified? They are classified according to cylinder arrangement with respect to the crankshaft, or according to method of cooling. What are the different types of piston rings? Compression rings, oil control rings, and scraper rings. What are the main causes of a cylinder having low compression? Broken piston rings, rings that are not seated properly, burnt valves, and poorly seating valves. What is the purpose of the oil control rings? They're used to control the thickness of the oil film on the cylinder walls. What may be the result of installing piston rings incorrectly? Excessive oil consumption. What type of piston rods are commonly found in radial engines? A master and articulating rod assembly. What type of bearings are in general use in reciprocating engines? Plain, roller, and ball bearings. Plain bearings are generally used for crankshafts, camshafts, and connecting rods. Roller bearings are used primarily as crankshaft main bearings, and ball bearings are used for supercharger impeller shafts bearings and crankshaft thrust bearings on large radial engines. What is the indication of valve blow-by? Valve blow-by is indicated by a hissing or whistle when pulling the propeller through by hand. A cylinder compression check should be completed to identify the faulty cylinder. What is the purpose of using more than one spring for valve closing? Valve springs will resonate at certain engine speeds. If only one spring is used, the valve will float as the spring surges. To eliminate this problem, two springs are installed on each valve. Each spring will resonate at a different engine speed, eliminating valve float. What is the purpose of valve overlap? Valve overlap permits better volumetric efficiency and lowers the cylinder operating temperatures. Describe the inspection you would give the valve springs during engine overhaul. They should be cleaned thoroughly, then visually inspected for evidence of overheating, cracks, broken ends, and compression strength. What is the purpose of using valves with sodium-filled stems? Some intake and exhaust valve stems are hollow and partially filled with metallic sodium. Sodium is used because it is an excellent heat conductor. The sodium melts at a relatively low temperature, and as the valve moves up and down, the sodium is circulated, carrying the heat from the valve head to the stem. Then the heat is dissipated into the cylinder head. What causes engine sudden stoppage? Striking an object, or engine seizure due to internal damage. What type of inspection must be made after sudden stoppage of an engine? Most manufacturers require complete engine teardown and inspection. What is the purpose of the crankshaft dynamic dampers used in aircraft engines? Dampers are used to overcome forces which cause deflection of the crankshaft and torsional vibration. These forces are generated by the power impulses of the piston. Crankshaft vibrations are reduced by placing float dampers in the counterweight assembly, particularly in a single throw type crankshaft. How would you make a run-out check on a crankshaft that is still installed in the engine? Remove the propeller from the crankshaft and attach a dial indicator gauge to the front of the crankcase. Adjust the position of the gauge needle so that it is touching the shaft. Rotate the crankshaft and check for misalignment. Refer to the table of limits to check the allowance. Flanged crankshafts must also be checked from the front face of the flange. What is detonation? Normal combustion is when the fuel-air mixture burns at a uniform rate across the combustion chamber. The temperature and pressure within the cylinder rise at normal rates as the mixture burns. All fuels have critical limits of temperature and compression. Beyond this limit, they will ignite spontaneously and burn with explosive violence. This instantaneous explosive burning of the last portion of the charge is called detonation. What cylinder is engine to magneto timing based on? The number 1 cylinder. Timing is usually set for around 30 degrees before top dead center of the compression stroke. What is engine sudden speed reduction? This occurs when the propeller strikes an object but continues to run. When this occurs, a thorough internal engine inspection should be carried out, including an oil analysis. The propeller should also be inspected along with a run-out check. What can be learned about the condition of an engine by studying the results of a compression check? From a cylinder compression check, you can determine if the valves, piston rings, and pistons are adequately sealing the combustion chamber. How can a cold cylinder be located on a double-row radial engine? Either an old tool called a magic wand or a more modern infrared laser thermometer. What instrument can be used to check bore for out of roundness? A cylinder bore can be checked with the dial indicator, telescoping gauge, an outside micrometer, or inside micrometer. What would a cold cylinder indicate? That there has been no combustion inside the cylinder, normally due to no ignition or clogged fuel nozzle. Where's a crack most likely to occur on a piston? A crack is most likely to occur where the piston pin connects. The metal is thinnest at this location. What should be done to a nose wheel airplane before removing the engine? Support the tail of the airplane. What is the running valve clearance on engines equipped with hydraulic lifters? Zero. What lever is used to adjust the manifold pressure in a reciprocating engine? The throttle lever. On an engine with a fixed pitch propeller, what is the relationship between manifold pressure and RPM? As RPM increases, MAP increases. What is an indication that primer is leaking or is open during engine operation? The engine will not idle properly. What should be done to repair a loose stud in an engine crankcase? Remove the loose stud and inspect the hole for size and the condition of the threads. It may be necessary to use a suitable oversized stud. What is meant by an engine part being within serviceable limits? part that is within serviceable limits will not likely wear to the point of causing engine failure within the next time between overhaul. What are the main parts of a reciprocating engine accessory section? Case and gear drivetrain. What is stoichiometric ratio? (15:1). What type of ignition systems are used on modern reciprocating engines? Electronic ignition systems. What type of hardware is used in reciprocating engine mounts? Heat-treated high stress. What type of ring goes on a chromium piston? Iron. The basic induction system of an aircraft reciprocating engine consists of what components? The basic induction system of an aircraft reciprocating engine consists of an air scoop used to collect the inlet air and ducting that transfers the air into the inlet filter. What are the three major parts of a reciprocating engine induction system? The air scoop, fuel delivery system, and the intake manifold. What effect does induction system icing have on engine performance? Induction system icing can cause an engine to act erratically and lose power and may possibly quit. What method is used to prevent or remove induction system ice in a reciprocating engine? The most common method of preventing or removing ice formation in the induction system is by the use of heated air. How is ice cleared in some aircraft induction systems if the carburetor heat is too low to clear the ice? Anti-icing fluid, such as alcohol, is sprayed into the induction system ahead of the carburetor. The fluid will dislodge the ice, which is ingested by the engine. What engine indication can be the result of a dirty air filter? Low power. What is the danger of using carburetor heat when operating at high power settings? The higher air temperatures could cause detonation and possible engine failure. Carburetor throttle ice is most likely to form when the throttle is in which position? When the throttle butterfly is in the partially closed position. What are two general classifications of superchargers used in reciprocating engine induction systems? They are classified as internally driven or externally driven supercharger systems. What is the purpose of a distribution impeller in a radial engine? It is designed to break up the fuel into finer particles for better distribution to the cylinders. How does an internally driven supercharger get its power? Internally driven superchargers are mechanically engine driven. A high-speed impeller is driven through a gear train from the crankshaft. The use of gear ratios can be single-stage or two-speed. A two-speed gear ratio normally varies from 16:1 to 12:1. Where does an externally driven supercharger get its power? By the exhaust gases that are directed against a turbine. For this reason, they are commonly called turbochargers. What unit regulates the amount of exhaust gases to the turbine of a turbocharger. The wastegate. What type of power is used to control the position of the turbocharger wastegate on some engines? Oil pressure to an actuating piston. What can cause the wastegate to stick? A buildup of carbon can cause the wastegate to stick. What are the most common ways to control a wastegate? Either mechanically with linkages to the throttle or a separate control, or by an actuator that is driven by oil pressure. What causes fuel evaporation ice? Fuel evaporation ice is formed because of the decrease in air temperature, resulting from evaporation of fuel after it is introduced into the airstream. What is the function of the turbocharger wastegate? It controls the volume of exhaust gas that is directed into the turbine. What may be the indication of leaking intake pipes? The engine runs rough. What may be the indication if a turbocharger wastegate will not close fully? The aircraft may not be able to reach critical altitude. What could be the probable cause of a turbocharger engine that surges? Wastegate or controller malfunction. What is used on many turbocharged engines for the wastegate actuator power? Oil pressure. How does a divergent-shaped jet engine inlet affect the air flowing to the engine when an airplane is in subsonic flight? It causes the air velocity to decrease and the air pressure to increase. Bell mouth inlet ducts are used typically on what type of aircraft? Helicopters. The Venturi-type particle separator found on mini turbine-powered helicopters utilize what characteristics of matter to help remove debris from induction air? Inertia. What is the most common means of regulating the cooling airflow through a reciprocating engine? Using cowl flaps. What is the purpose of the fins on engine cylinders? To increase the surface area of cylinders for cooling. What other engine characteristics are designed to aid in engine cooling besides cooling fins? The engine cowling and baffles are designed to force air through the cylinder, cooling fins. How is an engine designed to provide more cooling area? The outer surface of the cylinder is increased by use of cooling fins. Why is the open and closed adjustment during installation of cowl flaps important? For each engine installation, the cowl flaps are set for a tolerance that will permit them to open and close in the correct amount to keep the cylinder head temperature within allowable limits. What should be done to cylinders when too much of the cooling fin area is broken off? The cylinder should be replaced because it cannot cool properly and a hot spot will develop. When should cowl flaps be kept in the fully open position? normally during all ground run operations. What publication should be referred to before reprofiling cylinder cooling fins? The manufacturer's service or overhaul manual should be used to obtain the allowable limits. What power sources are used to operate the cowl flaps? Cowl flaps may be operated by electrical power, hydraulic power, or manually. What is the purpose of blast tubes? To direct jets of cooling air to accessories of the engine that have high heat concentrations, such as the generator. On radial engines, they duct air into the rear spark plug elbows of each cylinder to prevent overheating of the ignition leads. What are the main reasons that excessive heat in a reciprocating engine is undesirable? Excessive heat shortens the life of engine parts, impairs lubrication, and affects combustion. Describe the augmenter system. The augmenter system is used to help keep the temperature of air-cooled engines down by using exhaust gas energy to draw cool air over the engine. What is the source of air directed to engine bearings for cooling? Bleed air from the compressor section of the engine. What is the purpose of insulation on the exhaust duct of a turbine engine? To reduce the temperature of the structures in the vicinity of the exhaust duct or afterburner, and to eliminate the possibility of fuel or oil coming in contact with hot parts of the engine. What types of materials are used to make insulation blankets for turbine engines? They are made of stainless steel, layers of aluminum foil, fiberglass, or silver foil. What areas of a turbine engine are cooled by the secondary air passing through the engine? The combustion chamber and the turbines. What is the purpose of an engine cowling? It streamlines the engine to reduce drag and forms an envelope around the engine, which forces the airstream between the cylinders to cool them. What is the purpose of an oil cooler bypass valve? It allows the thick oil to bypass the cooler when the oil is cold. Where should cowl flaps be positioned during ground operations? Fully open. What is the purpose of cowl air seals? They force air to circulate around and through the baffle system. Where must most cooling air flow to cool a turbine engine? Through the inside of the engine. What areas of a turbine engine are cooled by air passing through the engine? The combustion chamber and turbine. What is the relationship between turbine engine upper temperature limits and power produced? The higher the combustion temperature that an engine can withstand without damage, the more power it is capable of producing. What is the approximate percentage of air passing through a turbine engine that is used for cooling rather than combustion? %75%. What is the unit of measure for manifold pressure? Inches of mercury. Other than cooling fans, how else can you cool a reciprocating engine? Cooling jackets.
The propeller control system is divided into two types of control. What are they? One for flight and one for ground operations. What is the purpose of a propeller? To create thrust and either pull or push the airplane through the air. What are the two types of propeller configurations? The tractor type and the pusher type. What type of propeller has the blade angle built into the propeller and cannot be changed? A fixed pitch propeller. What is the purpose of the metal tipping on a leading edge of a wooden propeller? It is to protect the propeller from damage caused by FOD in the air, during landing, taxiing, and takeoff. What tool is used to determine propeller blade angle? A universal propeller protractor. What are the aerodynamic forces and loads acting on a rotating propeller blade? A rotating propeller is acted upon by centrifugal force, aerodynamic twisting, centrifugal twisting, torque bending, and thrust bending forces. What is the meaning of propeller blade back and face? The curved side of the propeller is called the blade back. This is the side that faces away from the engine. The flat side of the propeller is known as the blade face. This side of the blade faces the engine. If you're sitting in the cockpit, you will be looking at the face of the blade. What should be used to clean aluminum and steel propeller blades and hubs? They should be washed with a suitable cleaning solvent using a brush or cloth. What positions are used on a balance stand to check a two-bladed propeller for static balance? First the vertical position and then the horizontal position. Can a fixed pitch propeller's pitch be changed? No, they are fixed at a specific pitch angle. Why do you put the blades of a counterweight propeller into high pitch before stopping the engine? This type of propeller has a movable cylinder that slides over a fixed piston. In the low pitch position, the cylinder is outboard and the piston is exposed to the open air. In the high pitch position, the cylinder moves inboard and covers the piston. In this position, the piston is protected from dirt and moisture in the air. This is particularly important if the airplane engine will not be operated for several days. Why are cones installed on splined shafts with a propeller? The cones center the propeller on the shaft as they are forced toward each other by the tightening of the retaining nut. How is feathering accomplished on a constant speed counterweight propeller? By releasing governor oil pressure on the counterweights, the feathering spring moves the blades to the feathered position and the oil returns to the engine. What type of systems are used for de-icing propellers? Fluid or electrical de-icing systems. What is blade tracking? It is the process of determining the position of the tips of the propeller blades relative to each other. What is the purpose of a slinger ring on some propeller installations? Propeller de-icing fluid is ejected from a stationary nozzle on the engine into a U-shaped channel attached to the rear of the propeller assembly. The U-shaped channel is called the slinger ring. The fluid under pressure of centrifugal force is transferred through a small tube to the propeller's leading edge. Do the counterweights on a constant speed propeller increase or decrease the blade angle? The centrifugal forces on the counterweights increase the pitch of the blades. What should you adjust if a pilot requests 50 more RPM on an aircraft equipped with a constant speed propeller? Adjust the governor's prop lever set screw. What adjustments are powerplant mechanics allowed to make to the prop governor? Only the maximum RPM stop. Why are propellers indexed to the crankshaft of an engine? To reduce vibrations to a minimum. Can transverse cracks on a propeller be repaired? No. Transverse cracks of any size are unacceptable. What is the alpha range and beta range of a propeller? Beta range is the condition of the propeller during ground operations and in the reverse pitch position. Alpha range is the propeller's position when the aircraft is in flight. When changing metal bushings on a wooden propeller assembly, a thorough inspection of the bolt holes should be accomplished. Why? To check for elongation of the holes. How are wooden propellers cleaned? Soap and water. What happens to a constant speed feathering propeller when the propeller governor's oil pressure drops to 0 psi? It returns to the feathered position. What is the purpose of an arbor when balancing a propeller? To support the propeller on the balance knives. What two forces are balanced in a propeller governor in an on-speed condition? The speeder spring and fly weights. How do you determine the repairability of a damaged propeller blade? Reference the manufacturer's maintenance manual. When engine vibration is reported, what should be checked to determine if it is caused by the engine or the propeller? Blade tracking and blade angle setting. What positions of a two-blade propeller are used during a static balance test? Vertical and horizontal. What three things does a typical constant speed propeller governor accomplish when operating? It boosts engine oil pressure before it enters the propeller hub, controls the amount of oil that flows to the propeller, and senses the rotational speed of the engine. What pitch will a constant speed propeller move into at constant power when going into a nosedive? High pitch. What is the device that reduces vibrations in an aircraft with multiple propellers? Propeller synchronizers. Why is an oil accumulator connected to the prop governor? to assist with unfeathering the propeller.
Define the term thermal efficiency in regards to aircraft engines. It is the ratio of net work produced by the engine to the chemical energy supplied in the form of fuel. What are the major components of a typical gas turbine engine? A typical gas turbine engine consists of an air inlet, compression section, combustion section, turbine section, exhaust section, and accessory section. What are the two principal types of compressors used in turbojet aircraft? The two most common compressors in use today are the centrifugal flow and axial flow types. What are the four combustion chamber systems? They are the can-annular, annular, and reverse flow annular types. What is the purpose of the interconnector tubes between can-type combustion chambers? To spread the flame to the combustion chambers that are not equipped with igniter plugs during engine starting. What prevents the burning of the linear walls in can-type combustion chambers? Louvres are provided along the axial length of the liners to direct a cooling layer of air along the inside of the liner. What type of damage may be found when inspecting compressor blades? Dents, scratches, gouges, galing, burns, burrs, pitting, and cracks. What is the location and function of the diffuser section in a turbine engine? The diffuser is the divergent section of the engine, located between the compressor section and the burner cans. Its function is to change the high-velocity compressor discharge air to static pressure. Where are stress rupture cracks most likely to occur on turbine blades? They usually appear as small hairline cracks on or across the leading or trailing edge of the blades. The cracks appear at right angles from the edge length. How are compressor blades attached to a disc-type rotor? The compressor blades are fitted into the disc by either bulb-type, fir tree, or dovetail-type roots. The blades are locked by means of screw, peening, locking wires, pins, or keys. What is the purpose of the nozzle diaphragm, or turbine nozzle? The turbine nozzle prepares the combustion mass airflow to drive the turbine rotor. First, they change a portion of the heat and pressure energy to velocity energy. The fixed vanes are shaped and set at such an angle that they form several small nozzles that discharge the gases at extremely high speeds. The second purpose of the turbine nozzle is to deflect the gases, so they strike the turbine at the most efficient angle for maximum turbine rotation. What is the major difference between turboprop and turbojet engines? A turboprop engine usually has more turbine stages than the turbojet engine. In addition to operation, the compressor and accessories, the turboprop turbine must also drive a propeller. What is a turbofan engine? A turbofan engine is in principle the same as a turboprop, except that the propeller is replaced by a duct-enclosed axial flow fan. What is the starting sequence for a turbine engine? Rotate compressor with starter. Turn the ignition on and open the engine fuel valve. What are the 4 types of turbine engines? Turbofan, turboshaft, turbojet, turboprop. What is the effect of air density on the thrust of a turbine engine? Air density determines the mass of air that is used by a jet engine. The factors that affect density are the temperature and pressure of the air. If density increases, thrust increases, and vice versa. An increase in air temperature entering an engine will cause a decrease in air density and thrust, and an increase in air pressure entering the engine will cause an increase in air density and thrust. With a given throttle setting, engine thrust will vary if the temperature or pressure of the air entering the engine changes. What are the 2 most common types of thrust reversers? They are mechanical blockage type and aerodynamic blockage type. What is a split compressor system in a turbine engine? The split compressor system requires 2 concentric shafts joining the turbine stages to their respective compressors. What is one method of relieving thermal stress on a turbine disc? One method is to direct cooling bleed air back onto the surface of the disc. Another method is by using notches or grooves cut into the rim of the disc. What may be the indications of a turbojet engine that is out of trim? The engine has high exhaust gas temperatures for takeoff. What does it mean when you have high exhaust gas temperature, high fuel flow, and low thrust or power? Pending engine failure or low compression. What is a free turbine? A turbine wheel that, rather than driving the compressor rotor, drives a propeller or helicopter transmission. What is the main purpose of thrust reversers? For slowing the aircraft down to effective braking speeds. What are the advantages of turbofan engines over turbojet engines? A turbofan engine uses a fan to bypass some air around the engine core and to provide thrust. The advantage is that this provides additional thrust without increasing fuel flow. What methods are commonly used to accomplish turbine engine compressor field cleaning? Fluid wash and abrasive grit blast. What would the possible cause be for a turbojet or turbofan engine having high exhaust gas temperature, low RPM, and high fuel at all engine pressure ratio settings? Possible turbine damage or loss of turbine efficiency. What factors affect the amount of air going into a gas turbine engine? Throttle, operating speed, fuel burn, N2 speed, airspeed of aircraft. What is thermoshock in an APU? When the inlet door does not open fast enough. What kind of turbine engine is an APU? A small gas turbine engine made to transfer horsepower to a shaft. In a turbine engine combustion chamber, if the excess fuel drain valve is blocked, what will happen? Fire. What are turbofan blades made of? Hollow titanium and composites. What are the two types of turbine engine failures? Thermal and mechanical. What is the number one indication of performance of a turbine engine? Thermal efficiency. Why should turbine blades be reinstalled in the same location they were removed? To reduce vibrations. What are two general types of exhaust systems in use on reciprocating aircraft engines? Their short stack system and the collector system. What are two types of reciprocating engine exhaust systems? The short stack system and collector system. What are the possible hazards of exhaust system failure? It can result in carbon monoxide poisoning of the crew and passengers, or partial or complete loss of engine power and an aircraft fire. What type of exhaust system is generally used on low-powered, non-supercharged engines? The short stack system. What type of exhaust system is used on turbocharged engines? The exhaust collector system. What type of exhaust system creates a higher exhaust back pressure? The collector system. What is the purpose of a reciprocating engine exhaust system? It is used to remove heat and noxious gases from the engine nacelle. What removes noxious gases and heat? A reciprocating engine exhaust system. What are three components of an exhaust augmenter system? Bell mouth, sleeve, and vanes. What happens when lead, zinc, or galvanized marks are made on exhaust systems? The mark is absorbed by the metal when heated and causes a change in the molecular structure that weakens the metal. What type of visual indication can usually be seen in the area of an exhaust leak? Exhaust leaks usually leave flat gray or sooty black carbon streaks on the pipes in the area of the leak. How are ceramic-coated exhaust stacks cleaned? By the degreasing method only. What is the usual cause of muffler and heat exchanger failures? They are usually caused by concentrated areas of thermal stress or vibration stress. What is the most common form of damage in exhaust systems? Cracks are the result of repeated expansion and contraction. What should be the position of the wastegate when starting an engine? Fully open. Where are exhaust manifolds and stack failures most likely to occur? These failures usually occur at welds, flanges, or clamped points in the system. What is a common cause of the wastegate unit malfunctioning in a turbocharged system? The most common cause of wastegate malfunction is carbon buildup, coke buildup, causing the wastegate valve to stick in the closed position. What factors are affected if the area of the exhaust nozzle of a turbine engine is changed. The size of the exhaust nozzle affects both the engine performance and the exhaust gas temperature. Why are reverse thrusters not normally used during ground operations? The danger of blowing foreign objects up into the intake stream is too great. What are the probes in a turbine exhaust pipe used for? They are used to measure exhaust gas temperature and pressure. Why do you disassemble and inspect a collector type exhaust? Exhaust system failure can result in carbon monoxide poisoning of crew and passengers. What is the purpose of the wastegate on a turbocharged exhaust? This valve controls the amount of exhaust gases forced through the turbocharger turbine. When the gate is fully closed, all gases must pass through the turbine. Name 2 types of thrust reversers. They are mechanical blockage type and aerodynamic blockage type. Can a thrust reverser deliver 100% of engine power? No. What reference do you use when cleaning and inspection propellers for cracks? The Propeller Maintenance Manual. What material is used to make exhaust system muffler shrouds? Stainless steel. What drawback in using collector type exhaust systems is more than offset when used on turbocharged engines? The loss of horsepower due to exhaust system back pressure. Why are turbocharged exhaust system leaks very damaging at high altitudes? Pressure differential will cause the leak to escape with torch-like intensity. What are the components of a typical turbine exhaust nozzle? A tail cone, exhaust duct, and support struts. What do you use to mark turbine engine blades? Layout die or chalk. What are 2 categories of thrust reversers? Clamshell and cascade. Name 1 of 3 basic ultrasonic inspection methods. The 3 basic ultrasonic inspection methods are pulse echo, through transmission, resonance. What steps must be taken to prepare an aircraft for a 100-hour inspection? Remove or open all necessary inspection plates, access doors, fairings, and cowlings. Then thoroughly clean the aircraft and the engine. What may be used as a guide for a 100-hour inspection on aircraft engines? CFR Part 43, Appendix D. What additional inspection must be performed if the cylinder compression is weak? You must make an internal cylinder inspection for improper internal tolerances. Where are the aircraft engine operating limitations found? In the aircraft specifications or type certificate data sheet. Where can a mechanic look to identify an aircraft engine? On the engine identification plate, that is affixed to the engine in an accessible location. What publication is needed to inspect an engine for conformity with specifications? The engine specifications or type certificate data sheet. What type of FAA approval is required when a change to an engine design is not enough to require a new type certificate? A supplemental type certificate is required. What type of FAA approval is required when a change is made to the engine principle of operation? A new type certificate data sheet must be obtained. What instrument used for internal inspection has been a mainstay of engine inspections for many years? The borescope is a precision optical instrument used for remote visual inspections of internal inaccessible areas. How does an oil analysis program help to evaluate the internal condition of an engine? Oil analysis is a system that establishes a trend to measure engine health. One test does not do much unless something is very wrong. Do you perform an engine ground run after performing a 100-hour inspection? Yes. Why should a reciprocating engine be inspected when it is removed from storage after having been preserved? To determine whether or not it has sustained corrosion damage. What is the purpose of a hot section inspection of a turbine engine? To determine the integrity of hot section components. What is fan blade shingling? Fan blade shingling is the overlapping of the midspan shrouds of the fan blades. What publications are needed to perform a turbine engine overspeed inspection? The manufacturer's maintenance publication. What is required after a turbine engine experiences exhaust gas temperature exceeding limits? A hot section inspection. Name some places where a list of life-limited parts may be found. Type certificate data sheet, airworthiness limitations. What criteria are used to determine the replacement of life-limited turbine engine components? Cycles, hours, or calendar time. What inspection should a mechanic accomplish during coast down after shutdown of a turbofan or turbojet engine? Listen for an audible rubbing sound or other unusual noises from the engine. How do you wind a generator? Around the poles. How do you measure the inside of a cylinder? You measure it in 3 different places with an inside micrometer. What is the purpose of inlet guide vanes on a turbine engine? Inlet guide vanes help straighten the airflow and direct it into the first stages of the compressor. What are 2 functions of an APU? Starting the engines and running the air conditioning. How is the turbine rotor cooled? Bleed air and hollow channels in the blades. What is the source of cooling bleed air? The compressor. Many large, high-bypass turbofan engines use what type of fuel control system? Any large, high-bypass turbofan engines use the FAA type of fuel control system. What are the units in an engine fuel flow system? The system consists of a transmitter and an indicator for each engine. Where's the fuel flow transmitter located? It is mounted in the fuel line between the engine-driven pump and the carburetor. What type of readout is indicated on a fuel flow system? The indicator is calibrated to record the fuel flow in gallons per hour. What exactly does a mass fuel flow transmitter measure? The density mass of the fuel that flows through it. What is the reason for monitoring the fuel flow? In addition to fuel consumption, the operator can determine from the fuel flow indication whether the engine is operating at the correct fuel-air mixture for a given power setting. What does a manifold pressure gauge indicate? It measures absolute pressure in the intake manifold. What would be the effect of a broken manifold pressure gauge line? A broken line will cause the gauge to indicate atmospheric pressure. What does the engine tachometer indicate? It indicates crankshaft speed, RPM. What is the most likely cause of an oscillating tachometer? A kink in the cable. What type of tachometer is used in multi-engine airplanes? Alternating current tachometer generators. What are turbine engine tachometers designed to indicate? They are designed to indicate percentage of engine rotor RPM. What is the EPR on a turbine engine? It is the ratio between total turbine discharge pressure to total inlet pressure and is an indication of the thrust being developed by the engine. What is the electric source for a cylinder head temperature gauge? A thermocouple attached to the cylinder head. Where is a carburetor air temperature bulb located? It is in the air intake passage to the engine. How can a turbine engine EGT be checked without operating the engine? By checking resistance to the thermocouples and circuits. What is the typical acceptable resistance of a cylinder head thermocouple cable? 2 to 8 ohms. What directly controls manifold pressure? Engine RPM and throttle opening. On an engine equipped with a fixed pitch propeller, what controls both manifold pressure and engine RPM? The throttle control. When checking the manifold pressure during engine operation, in what position would the prop control be set? Low pitch. What is the possible cause when a turboprop engine oil pressure drops off severely and the oil supply remains? Oil pressure transmitter or indicator malfunction. Why are turbine engines measured in percent of engine performance instead of RPM? Turbine engines are measured in percentage of engine power instead of RPM because jet engines do not output power, but rather thrust force. Another reason is because if measured in RPMs, the numbers would be really large. Gasoline and other liquid fuels do not burn at all unless they are mixed with what other element? Gasoline and other liquid fuels do not burn at all unless they are mixed with air. Where are the fuel spray nozzles located in a turbine engine? They are located either externally or internally on the combustion chamber in such a way that the fuel can be sprayed into the combustion area. Name the heat sources for the operation of fuel heaters used in turbine engines. Turbine engines use heat exchangers to heat the fuel and prevent the possibility of ice crystal formations. Fuel lines are routed through the fuel heater, which use a heat source, either bleed air or engine lubricating oil. If bleed air is used as a heat source, it is called an air-to-liquid heat exchanger. When oil is used, it is a liquid-to-liquid heat exchanger. What engine variables are sensed by a hydromechanical fuel control? The fuel control senses power lever position, RPM, compressor inlet pressure temperature, burner pressure, or compressor discharge pressure, and EGT or TIT. In an electrical fuel control system, what are the two input components? Electrical and fuel. What are the two most commonly used carburetors of small reciprocating engines? They are the float type carburetor and pressure type carburetor. What type of fuel control unit is used in a turbine engine? Both hydromechanical and electronic fuel control units are in use today. However, the most common fuel control unit is the hydromechanical type. What is meant by trimming a turbine engine? Adjusting the fuel control for the proper specific gravity of the fuel and the proper idle and fuel throttle RPM. When should a turbine engine be trimmed? Whenever there is a loss of engine power, or the manufacturer specifies. What specifications are used to trim a turbine engine? The data plate on the engine typically contains the trimming specifications. What are the three types of fuel controls for a turbine engine? Supervisory EEC, electronic engine control, the FAA full authority digital electronic control, and mechanical. What is a FAA? A full authority digital electronic control. It is a high precision digital electronic fuel control that utilizes an electronic engine control and the flight management computer to measure the fuel nozzles that prevent overspeed and over temperature condition. The FAA also sends information to indication systems for the aircraft crew. Does a turbine engine controlled by FAA require manual trimming? No, the FAA is self-trimming. What is the purpose of a mixture control in a float-type carburetor? It is to control the fuel-air mixture as air density changes with altitude changes. What is the purpose of an accelerating system on a float-type carburetor? When the throttle is opened rapidly, the fuel-air mixture will lean out momentarily. To overcome this tendency, a charge of fuel from the accelerating pump will temporarily enrich the mixture in the venturi. Describe the purpose and operation of a venturi. The venturi in a carburetor is an example of Bernoulli's principle, which states, as the velocity of a gas or liquid increases, the pressure decreases. The venturi performs three functions. It proportions the fuel-air mixture, lowers the pressure at the discharge nozzle, and limits airflow at full throttle. The principal operation of the carburetor depends on the differential between the atmospheric pressure and the decreased pressure offered by the venturi. What is the function of a metering jet? Its purpose is to limit the fuel flow when the throttle valve is wide open. The main metering jet is placed in the fuel passage between the float chamber and the discharge nozzle. What is the fuel metering force in a float-type carburetor? It is differential pressure between the pressure in the float chamber and at the nozzle. What would be the result of using excessively rich idle mixtures? Excessively rich idle mixtures will cause carbon fouling on the spark plug. What is the purpose of the economizer system in a float carburetor? The economizer is essentially a valve, which is closed at throttle settings below 60% to 70% of rated power, but provides additional fuel for engine cooling to prevent detonation at higher throttle settings above 60 to 70%. Where does a pressure-injected carburetor attain fuel pressure? It obtains fuel pressure from the boost pumps for starting and from the engine-driven fuel pump for normal operations. What operates an automatic mixture control on a pressure carburetor? The AMC contains sealed bellows that expand or contract with changes in atmospheric pressure. The movement of the bellow operates a tapered needle that controls the impact air pressure into the A chamber of the carburetor. In what position do you place the mixture control of a pressure-injected carburetor to stop the engine? In the idle cutoff position. What RPM indication should result when the mixture control is placed in the idle cutoff position when the idle mixture is set correctly? There should be a slight increase in RPM, followed by a rapid drop of RPM to 0. What is the purpose of filling a pressure-injected carburetor full of fuel and allowing it to soak for a period of about 8 hours prior to installation? To soften the diaphragms and make them as pliable as they were when the carburetor was originally calibrated. What are the three types of carburetor icing? Throttle icing, impact icing, and fuel evaporation icing. What is the typical fuel pressure in a float-type carburetor? (3 to 5 psi). Name some advantage of direct fuel injection systems over conventional carburetor systems. Less danger of induction system icing, improved acceleration, improved fuel distribution, reduced overheating of individual cylinders, and better fuel economy. What is the purpose of filters in a fuel system? They are used to prevent foreign matter from entering the carburetor. Why do carburetors in aircraft have a mixture control? Because air density changes with altitude, which affects the air-fuel mixture. The mixture control provides a means to adjust for the correct mixture at different altitudes. What two items are adjusted when setting idling conditions on a float carburetor? The throttle stop for idling RPM and the idle mixture through the idle needle valve. What is the purpose of fuel selector valves? They provide a means of shutting off fuel flow, cross-feed for tank and engine selection, and for fuel transfer. What should be looked for when inspecting an engine-driven fuel pump? Look for fuel leaks and security of mounting. What is the purpose of an engine-driven fuel pump? The engine-driven fuel pump always delivers a continuous supply of fuel at the proper pressure during engine operation. What type of fuel pump is generally used with large reciprocating engines? A positive displacement rotary vane type pump. What happens to the excess fuel not required by the engine in a constant displacement pump? The pressure relief valve opens and the fuel is routed back to the inlet side of the pump. What is the most common type of fuel boost pump? The electrically driven centrifugal type pump. What are the functions of a boost pump? First, during starting, the boost pump supplies fuel to the engine pump for starting. Also, they are used to maintain pressure in the fuel lines to prevent the fuel from boiling off at altitude. Finally, boost pumps act as a backup if the engine-driven pump fails. What is the purpose of the bypass valve in the engine-driven fuel pump? The bypass valve provides a path around the pump vanes for starting the engine and to allow fuel to bypass the pump in case of pump failure. What is the purpose of using boost pumps in a fuel system? Electric boost pumps are used to supply fuel pressure to a carburetor during engine starting and in case of engine-driven pump failure. However, a main function of a boost pump to keep the pressure on the suction side of the engine-driven pump from becoming low enough to permit the fuel to boil when operating at high altitudes. What are the three general causes of vapor lock? Low fuel pressure, high fuel temperatures, and excessive fuel turbulence. Turbine engine fuel pumps may be divided into what two distinct system categories? Constant displacement and variable displacement. What category is a turbine engine driven gear type pump? Constant displacement. What type of fuel pump can be made to vary the fuel flow at any speed? A variable displacement pump. What part of a gas turbine engine fuel system is very susceptible to the formation of ice? The fuel filters. How is the engine fuel system protected from ice formation? Using fuel heaters. Why is a micron fuel filter provided with a bypass valve as a necessary safety factor? because the small openings in this type of filter make it very susceptible to clogging. Where are fuel filters located? They're located at the fuel pump, in line with the system. Last chance filter screens are in the fuel controls. Can you use automotive gasoline in a reciprocating engine in place of avgas? Yes, if you have an STC. What is the purpose of the pressurizing portion of a pressurizing and dump valve? To provide primary and secondary fuel flow to the dual-line duplex fuel nozzles. What do the divided fuel flows of a turbine engine duplex fuel nozzle produce in the fuel? Two spray patterns. What is stoichiometric ratio? (15 to 1). What are the three components of an EEC? The hydromechanical fuel control, the electronic fuel control unit, and aircraft-mounted power lever angle potentiometer. What meters fuel in a FADEX system? The EEC. How long must you wait to adjust idling controls on a float-type carburetor? (5 minutes). When trimming a turbine engine, what are you checking? Idle, fuel throttle, and acceleration. Where are the fire switches normally installed? Fire switches are typically installed on the center overhead panel or center console in the flight deck. What are the main categories of engine fire protection systems? Spot detection, continuous loop, and flame detectors. Name examples of spot detection type systems. Thermal switch and thermocouple. Name examples of continuous loop detection systems. Finwall, KID, and pneumatic. When using thermocouple type fire detection system, what happens if the engine overheats slowly? A thermocouple depends on the rate of temperature rise and will not give a warning if the engine slowly overheats or a short circuit develops. How many thermocouples are required for engine fire detection? The number of thermocouples used in an engine fire detection system depends on the size of the fire zone and the total circuit resistance. Describe the operation of a KID continuous loop fire detector system. The KID continuous loop system has two wires embedded in a special ceramic core within an Inconel tube. One wire acts as an internal ground, and the other wire is a hot lead that provides a current. When the ceramic core material heats up, its resistance drops, completing a circuit between the internal wires, lighting a light. Where does the thermocouple fire detector system get its electrical power to operate? The thermocouple produces power to close a relay, and power from the aircraft electrical system flows through the relay to the warning light. Describe a thermal switch fire detector system. Thermal switch systems have one or more lights that are energized by the aircraft's electrical system. When a heat-sensitive thermal switch closes the circuit at a specified temperature. How are thermal switches electrically connected in the circuit? The thermal switches are connected in parallel with each other, but in series with the warning light. A temperature rise in any section of the circuit will cause a thermal switch to close and complete the circuit to indicate a fire or overheat condition. What is the most common cause of a false fire warning in a continuous loop detector system? The common causes of false warnings are dents, kinks, or crushed sensing elements. The damage causes the internal wire to short to the ground wire or outer tubing. Will a continuous loop fire detector still indicate the presence of a fire if the element is broken in two? Yes. What two methods are used to discharge fire extinguishing agents? Mechanical and electrical. What method is used to release the fire extinguishing agent in a typical turbine engine fire protection system? One common method is to equip the fire extinguishing containers with discharge valves that are operated by electrically discharged cartridges. The discharge plug is seated with a breakable disc that is ruptured by the explosive cartridge. The contents of the bottle are discharged into the engine area. What is the color marking used to identify fire extinguishing lines? A brown tag with a row of black diamonds. What method is used to determine proper fire extinguisher container pressure? Check the container gauge to determine if the pressure is between the prescribed minimum and maximum limits. What methods other than the pressure gauge is used to indicate low agent pressure in a container? Some aircraft are equipped with a low pressure warning light in the cockpit. What is the purpose of the yellow and red discharge plugs in a turbine engine fire extinguishing system? The yellow plug indicates a pilot-initiated discharge. The red plug indicates a thermal-activated discharge. What are two methods commonly used to distribute the fire extinguishing agent to the engine? A perforated tube or discharge nozzles are used to distribute the agent. How does the fire extinguishing agent put out the fire? It dilutes the atmosphere so that it will not support combustion. What does HRD stand for? High rate of discharge. How is the fire extinguishing agent distributed from an HRD system? It is delivered from opened-end tubes. How long does it take to discharge the extinguishing agent in an HRD system? It only takes 1 to 2 seconds. Which type of fire detection system gives a more complete coverage to a fire hazard? A continuous loop system. What happens to the resistance of a thermocouple if you make it shorter? The resistance changes. What can you do instead of shortening a thermocouple? Wrap it in loops and zip tie it. What happens when you cut the leads of a cylinder head temp probe shorter? Resistance changes. What hazard is posed by fuel collecting in the combustion chamber? Fire. If igniters or fuel lines leak, Where do they leak to? Fire zone. If a cylinder head temp wire has excessive length, what should be done? Bundle and secure it. Do not trim. Name one general type of inertia starter. There are three general types of inertia starters: hand, electric, and combination hand and electric starters. What is a magneto? A magneto is a self-contained AC generator driven by the engine for the purpose of ignition in a reciprocating engine. Why are magneto ignition systems preferred over battery-type ignition systems for reciprocating engines? Magnetos are independent ignition sources and do not rely on battery power to provide ignition. What can cause a reciprocating engine to continue to run when the ignition switch is in the off position? If there is a break in the P-lead wire from the magneto to the switch, then the ignition switch cannot ground the magneto primary circuit. What is the purpose of the condenser in a high-tension magneto electrical system? To prevent arcing at the points and to hasten the collapse of the magnetic field around the primary coil. What does a capacitor do in a magneto circuit? It prevents arcing at the points when the circuit is open and hastens the collapse of the magnetic field about the primary coil. Where is the E-gap position? The E-gap position is when the poles of the rotating magnet are a few degrees past the neutral position. E-gap is the position at which the points begin to open. What are the three major circuits of a high-tension magneto system? The magnetic circuit, primary electrical circuit, and secondary electrical circuit. What are the components of a high-tension magnetic circuit? The magnetic circuit consists of a permanent rotating magnet, soft iron core, and pole shoes. What happens when the primary breaker points open in a magneto? Opening the breaker points stopped the flow of current in the primary coil. The magnetic field that was emitted by the primary coil collapses. As this magnetic field collapses, the flux lines that cut across the windings of the secondary coil induce a pulse of high voltage current in the secondary coil needed to fire the spark plugs. What is the piston position when the spark occurs in a cylinder? The position is a specified number of degrees before top dead center on the compression stroke. What is a dual magneto? The dual magneto incorporates two magnetos in one housing. They share the rotating magnet and cam. However, they have their own set of points, coils, and distributor blocks. What is the difference between a low tension and a high tension ignition system? In the high tension system, the high voltage is generated in the magneto and flows to the plugs through high tension leads. In a low tension system, the low voltage is generated in the magneto and flows through low tension leads to the primary windings of a transformer coil located near each spark plug. There, the voltage is increased to high voltage by transformer action and is conducted to the plugs by very short high tension leads. When the ignition switch is in the off position, what is the condition of the primary circuit? It is completed through the ignition switch to ground. What type of ignition system is used in most turbine engines? A typical turbine engine is equipped with an electronic capacitor type ignition system. What three conditions are required to fire plugs in a cylinder when the piston is in the prescribed position? The magneto's magnet poles must be in the E-gap position, the breaker points must be open, and the distributor rotor must be aligned with the distributor electrode for that cylinder. What is a dual ignition system, and what part of the system is grounded when the ignition switch is placed in the right position? A dual ignition system uses two separate magnetos, with the harness arranged so that each magneto fires one plug in each cylinder. If the switch is set to the right, the left magneto will be grounded, preventing it from firing. What is internal timing of a magneto? It is adjusting the breaker points to open when the poles of the rotating magnet are in the E-gap position. What is the purpose of an impulse coupling used with a magneto? The impulse coupling is used to retard the timing of the spark to after top dead center for starting the engine. It provides a momentarily high rotational speed to produce a spark at low crankshaft RPM. What is staggering ignition timing? It is the firing of one spark plug before the other instead of firing them simultaneously. What is the proper spark plug reach? The proper spark plug reach is when the electrode end of the plug inside the cylinder is in the best position to achieve ignition. Why is it important to keep track of the cylinders that spark plugs are installed in? Because spark plugs can provide a lot of information about the health of a specific cylinder. What is the function of the igniter plugs in a turbine engine? The function of the igniter plug is to provide a discharge gap for the current, which is stored in the capacitor. The discharge results in a high-intensity spark, which ignites the fuel-air mixture. When are turbine engine ignition systems normally in use? The ignition system is required only for starting or restarting an engine. What are the two types of igniter plugs? Annular gap, a long-reach plug that extends into the combustion chamber. Constrained gap, a short-reach plug that does not extend into the chamber because the spark does not remain close to the plug. What is the purpose of the dual magneto configuration? For redundancy and safety, in case one magneto fails. How can you tell if a starter commutator is dirty or worn? An excessively noisy starter. What does it mean when the starter relay clicks when the starter switch is placed in the start position? This indicates that the supply voltage is too low to supply enough current to the relay coil to fully engage the contact points. What is an advantage of air turbine starters when compared to electric starters for large turbine engines? They're lightweight and do not have the same cool-down periods as electric starters. Why do turbine igniters not get carbon fouled as often as reciprocating engine spark plugs? Due to extremely high rates of electrical discharge in the turbine igniters. What are the three parts of ignition system of a turbine? Exciter, ignition lead, igniter. What is the difference between a temporary magnet and a permanent magnet? A permanent magnet is one that retains its magnetic properties for a long period of time. Temporary magnets, also called an electromagnet, are those that simply act like permanent magnets when they are within a strong magnetic field or have current flowing near them. What does the ignition light indicate when timing a magneto? It indicates when the points are beginning to open. In terms of the engine crankshaft position, when does the ignition event occur? A specified number of crankshaft degrees before top dead center on the compression stroke. What is the purpose of the capacitor in a magneto? The capacitor prevents arcing at the points and aids in collapsing of the magnetic field. What is the main concern when preparing a magneto for installation? Internal timing. What are the three events required to fire a spark plug in a cylinder when its piston is in the prescribed position? Magneto and E-gap position, breaker points opening and the distributor electrically aligned with that cylinder. What is the function of a duty cycle in relation to a turbine engine ignition system? A duty cycle allows the operation of the ignition system for a given amount of time, to be followed by a minimum specified cooling down period. Name three sources of high volume, low pressure compressed air commonly used for starting jet transport aircraft equipped with air turbine starters. An onboard auxiliary power unit, a ground power unit, and compressor bleed air from an already running engine. Name two parts of a starter generator that commonly require periodic inspection to ensure that they do not wear beyond operational limits. The commutator and brushes. Between the field and armature windings in a starter generator, which components ordinarily receive current from operation in the start mode? Generally, both the field and the armature receive current for operation in the start mode. What are the three components of a spark plug? Electrode, insulator, and bore. Spark plug leads perform two functions. What are those functions? Carry the voltage and shield the power from radios. How many windings does a starter generator have? The starter generator internal circuit has 4 field windings: a C field, a shunt field, a compensating field, and an interpole or commutating winding. What 3 windings are activated during start mode in a starter generator? During starting, the C field, compensating field, and commutating windings are used. What 3 windings are active when generating power in a starter generator? When operating as a generator, the shunt, the compensating, and commutating windings are used. In a solid-state ignition system, what component controls the spark? A microprocessor. What is used if an impulse coupling is not present? A shower of sparks. Name the components of a basic magnetic circuit. The magnetic circuit consists of a permanent multi-pole rotating magnet, soft iron core, and pole shoes. How would you seat newly installed generator brushes to the commutator? 1. Remove cover. 2. Remove brushes. 3. Install sandpaper. 4. Install new brushes. 5. Rotate generator. 6. Remove brushes. 7. Remove sandpaper. 8. Blow out generator. 9. Install new brushes. 10. Install cover. When is it necessary to replace the brushes in the starter? Once they have reached half of their original length. Where is the generator rating and performance data located? On the data plate attached to the generator. What units make up a DC alternator 3-unit regulator? The voltage regulator, current limiter, and reverse current cutout. What method is used to control the voltage of an aircraft alternator? The voltage regulator. What determines the frequency of the voltage of an alternator? The frequency depends upon the speed of rotation of the rotor and the number of poles. How is alternator frequency maintained? By installing a constant speed drive unit between the engine and the alternator. What are the 3 basic types of DC motors? Series motors, shunt motors, and compound motors. Name the parts of a DC motor. The armature, brushes, commutator, and field frame. Why is the starter generator system used on many turbine engines? To save space and weight, the starter generator operates as a starter motor during engine starting. After the engine has reached a self-sustaining speed, it switches operation to a generator for supplying AC electrical power for aircraft systems. Why should stranded wire be used in powerplant applications? It is less likely to fatigue and break from vibrations. What is the American wire gauge system of designating electrical wire size? A gauge number is assigned to the wire according to its cross-sectional area. The smaller the gauge number, the larger the wire. What is open wiring? Any wire, wire group, or wire bundle not enclosed in conduit. What methods are used to control the voltage output of DC aircraft generator? The vibrating type voltage regulator, 3-unit regulator, and carbon pile. What aircraft electrical system normally doesn't have a fuse or circuit breaker? Starter circuit. Why are protective covers placed on some electrical switches? To prevent the switch from accidentally being actuated. What are the causes of excessive arcing at the generator brushes? Arcing can be caused by a commutator that is dirty, rough, or out of round. A common cause of arcing is worn or binding brushes, or when brush springs tension is too low. When installing single wires or wire bundles, how much slack is normally allowed between supports? Slack between supports should normally not exceed ½ of an inch. What precautions should be taken when running wires close to heating ducts or exhaust stacks? The wire should be insulated with a high temperature resistant material. What is indicated on the amp meter when the engine is running and the AC generator is producing power? That power is being produced. Why are multiple generator systems paralleled? To ensure that each generator shares the load. What DC alternator component prevents battery reverse current flow into the armature? The rectifier. How many phases are used in most aircraft AC alternator systems? Three phases. Name some methods that are used to maintain 400 Hz alternator output frequency on large turbojet or turbofan engines. Constant speed drives, integrated drive generators, variable speed, constant frequency power systems. What are the components of a direct cranking electrical starter system? An electric motor, reduction gears, and an automatic engaging and disengaging mechanism. What type of DC motor is commonly used for an aircraft engine starter? A series wound motor. Why is a series wound motor commonly used as an aircraft engine starter? Because it has high starting torque under heavy load conditions. During engine run-ups, with systems running, if the battery is under excessive load, what should be done? Turn off systems. If you have two generators wired in parallel and they both put out 60 amps, what would be your total amperage? $120 amps. In an aircraft with twin engines, how are the generators operated to supply the aircraft with power? Parallel. What's the output of an AC generator? Alternating current, 120 volts or higher. What controls the generator? The generator control unit. What is a CSD and what does it do? It's a constant speed drive. It keeps the generator spinning at a constant speed. Name one type of oil filter used on aircraft engines. Screen, Kuno, canister, or spin-on. What is straight mineral oil? It is a type of natural lubricating oil that has no additives for foaming, cleaning, or viscosity. What is ashless dispersant oil? It is a type of mineral oil with additives that evenly spread contaminants throughout the oil. The additives that are used do not form ashes. What is synthetic oil? Synthetic oil is an oil that is man-made through the process of chemically altering the molecular structure of petroleum oil to achieve the desired characteristics. What is meant by multi-viscosity oil? It is a type of oil that has varying viscosity. When the oil is cold, it will have low viscosity. But when it warms up, the viscosity will increase for better lubrication. For example, 5W30 has a viscosity index of 5 when it is cold, but 30 when it is warm. What are the purposes of reciprocating engine oil? It cleans, cools, cushions, seals, and lubricates parts. What is the most important property that aircraft reciprocating engine oil must possess? Viscosity. What factors must be considered in determining the proper grade of oil to use in a specific engine? The operating load, rotational speeds, and operating temperatures are the most important factors to be considered. What is the purpose of the oil flow control valve, or oil cooler bypass valve? When the oil is cool, the valve will direct it around the oil cooler. When the oil is warm, it will be directed through the oil cooler. What are some oil contaminants? Gasoline, moisture, acid, dirt, carbon, and metallic particles. From what location on a reciprocating engine is the oil temperature usually taken? In either system, the bulb is located where it measures oil temperature before it enters the hot section of the engine. In a dry sump lubricating system, the oil temperature bulb is located anywhere in the oil inlet line in between the oil tank and the engine. Wet sump systems have the temperature bulb located where it senses the temperature after the oil passes through the oil cooler. What do metallic parts on an oil screen indicate? Metallic parts may be an indication of internal failure of the engine. What could cause oil foaming? Foaming can be caused by diluted oil, contaminated oil, or the oil level is too high. What would be an indication of blocked oil cooler passages? High oil temperature. What would be an indication of inadequate oil supply? Low oil pressure and high oil temperature. What type of oil is used in turbine engine lubrication systems? Specially developed synthetic oils. Where can you find the specific grade of oil for a particular aircraft? Oil grades can be found in the airplane flight manual or the pilot's operating handbook. What are two types of oil coolers used in turbine engine lubrication systems? The air-cooled oil cooler and fuel-cooled oil cooler are the two basic types in general use. What is the meaning of oil flash point and fire point? Oil flash point is the temperature at which the oil will begin to give off ignitable vapors. The fire point is the temperature at which there are sufficient vapors to support a continuous flame. What is the weight of aircraft engine oil? Approximately 7.5 pounds per U.S. gallon. What is the purpose of oil dilution system? The oil dilution system thins the oil by introducing the fuel into the lubrication system, which makes cold weather starting easier. Fuel is used because it will evaporate out of the oil and leave through the crankcase breather. What is the primary purpose of engine oil lubricant? to reduce friction. What is the SOAP analysis? Spectrometric Oil Analysis Program is an oil analysis system that establishes a trend to measure engine health. One test does not do much unless something is very wrong. Where are carbon seals used in turbine engines? Carbon seals are used in aircraft gearboxes, air turbine motor starters, and main shaft seals. What is the key purpose of lubrication in a turbine engine? For lubrication of the main shaft bearings. Where are engine oil filters located? They are located between the oil pump output and the engine bearings. Why do reciprocating engines require oil with a high viscosity index? Higher viscosity indexes allow for easier starting in cold temperatures and prevents the oil from becoming too thin at operating temperatures to protect bearings under operating loads. Why do reciprocating engines require high viscosity oil? Higher viscosity oil performs better in reciprocating engines because they have large clearances, high operating temperatures, and high bearing pressures. What two factors impact fluid viscosity? Temperature and pressure, although pressure has a very small effect on viscosity. What is the purpose of ashless dispersant oil? To prevent sludge buildup and oil filters from clogging. What is the most critical lubrication point in a gas turbine engine? The turbine bearing. Why is an oil tank required to have expansion space? To provide for thermal expansion and air in the return oil. Name some areas of turbine engine oil systems where oil screens or filters may be located. Oil pressure system, the scavenge system, at or just before the oil jets. Why do dry sump reciprocating engines have a smaller sump? To prevent a large accumulation of oil in the engine crankcase.